to wrench it away. Cotton the dive for Henshaw. You're kidding me.
Dech and resolve has been tested. Cotton drops.
Not sure what to do, so kicks it back up to the top. Shot clock at 5 for Cotton. That's ridiculous. Bryce Cotton at his very, very best.
Hello, everybody. This is Adam Batt here. It's the Wildcat Wrap Season 1, Episode 14. A little bit of a sad face. We come here with like a slight bit of sadness in our hearts, slight little tear. The Perth Wildcats season is officially over, but we are here as a collective to break it all down. And by we, I mean, I'm very fortunate to have the two most amazing Perth Wildcats people. Obviously, lots of great ones out there with our huge fan following, but two people that I've had the fortunate pleasure to work with on this podcast. Josh Higgins, the leader, the Capitan, our chief of staff, I guess you want to call him, Josh Higgins from the Barstool Fix, and of course, Declan Paidra as well, a huge part of the Wildcat Rap podcast. But Josh, firstly, over to you. Welcome back to the show, mate.
Thanks, mate. Now, looking forward to obviously breaking down that Game 3 performance. But I think more excitingly, mate, let's get into a few rumours and sort of get talking about NBL 26. It's that time of the year. We're only about 2 weeks away from NBL free agency opening up after the NBL final series. And there's plenty of rumours already heating up already, mate. But Dech, how are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. A bit sad that the Wildcats went down by 1 point. Really, we should have snuck in with the missed calls, but the season, it's finished, it's done. On to NBL 26 and exciting times ahead, as you said, rumours and everything floating about. So ready to kick it off.
Yeah, that's it. So let's start off with the review. Let's go all the way back to that fateful evening on Tuesday. It was just it was the classic Melbourne United and Perth Wildcats game, right down to the wire. Plenty of high quality shooting, surprisingly tough defense from Perth Wildcats, unexpected from Perth. Definitely, you know that you're going to get it from United. Josh, sort of just kick us off with how you saw the game unfold. We can maybe talk about a couple of controversial calls a little bit later, but it was what everyone had described, at least at the conclusion of the game, as just one of the best NBL games and one of the best final games you've ever watched.
Yeah, it was an interesting game, mate, for a number of reasons. And when you look at it and you go down in sort of looking at what the end score was, 113 to 112, it was all of that. It was the greatest game, I think, of this season. And I know Andrew Gaze has spoken about it as well. A lot of people in the media. It was one of the greatest games of all time. And it genuinely was when you look at, obviously, the importance and what was the winner going towards and what the loser was going to. One was going home, one was going to a championship series. And that's where this series was incredible. But from a Perth Wildcats perspective, it was a very disappointing finish. I know there's been a lot of people talking about the Chris Goulding foul that sent him to the free throw line for that one free throw. Well, if I'm being completely honest with everyone, it was a genuine foul and it was 100% needed to be called in that situation. So I think if anyone's whinging about that foul call, you'd be whinging on the opposite end of it if that was a Bryce Cotton under the basket getting fouled and it wasn't called. So just think about that one. Now, I know the missed call, what you're referencing there, Batty, is obviously the goaltend. There was a number of missed calls that were missed. And I know from a Perth Wildcats perspective, it's very easy to get caught up in the goaltend, for example. You had the Ian Clark travel as well. And then also in the third quarter, you had the Ben Henschel foul or non-call there with Chris Goulding going for the block on that dunk attempt from Benny Henschel. God knows why he went for the dunk anyways, but that's another question, another story for another day. But I know we all speak about the umpiring, and it is a major factor as to maybe why the Perth Wildcats are going home. If you take the points away from the travel, you take, add the points from the goaltend, and maybe you send Benny Henschel to the free throw line to get a couple other points there. Maybe that swings the momentum into the Perth Wildcats' favour. Well, I'm sorry, Perth Wildcats fans, but you gave up a double-digit lead in that fourth quarter to eventually go down. And if it wasn't for a Jesse Wagstaff three-point shot after two missed shots already, we wouldn't even be speaking about Chris Goulding at the line anyway. So I think at the end of the day, the Wildcats shot themselves in the foot. When you look at this across the board, once again, we've got to look at a few things. We've got to look at the fact that the Perth Wildcats just continue to show they're not a defensive-minded team. And that's going to be the big worry and the big concern this offseason. When we talk about a few players later on and maybe a couple of the rumour mills as well, we'll sort of look to try and address, I guess, some of these defensive problems that the Perth Wildcats have faced, not only this season, but last season as well. So it's going to be interesting, and I've got a few adjustments that I'm looking forward to talking about soon. But it was an incredible game nonetheless, but a very souring way to end the season for the Perth Wildcats.
Yeah, it was. Dech, I mean, like you would have watched it too every single second. I'm sure you would have been up and down, like had to have the air conditioner on full ball just to keep the sweat from sort of going everywhere. Like, what was your take on how the game unfolded, especially after Josh referenced, such a strong start in that first term to then, gradually let the lead slip. The calls, sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. It always sort of eventually evens out across the game. It's that rub of the green. How did you sort of see it unplay, and was it an opportunity missed?
I think it was definitely an opportunity missed. The way we played, like, it was a great game of basketball, and it was a great series overall. You look at game 2 and everyone's saying it's the loudest the Red Army's been, and I'm one of the people saying that. So that game 3, it always was going to go to 3 games, absolute cracker of a series, and to go down by 1 point, it is heartbreaking, especially in Melbourne. And to see Christian Doolittle play his ass off, essentially, like best game of his career for the Wildcats, BC, just dropping his lazy average of, I think, 28 to 30 points. It was a missed opportunity, especially on the defensive end. Like, you can't give up 112 points and expect to win a game 3 in their hometown. Like, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot more often than not if you're going to play that way. So, yeah, we've got the offensive power to do it. That's fine. But can you keep it up consistently and expect the other team to, follow that? Absolutely not. So definitely a missed opportunity. Great game overall. I mean, I wasn't too upset about it in the end just because of, the way we lost. We did fight it out quite well. But, yeah, no, definitely upsetting to see the boys go out like that.
Yeah, they certainly gave themselves like plenty of chances to stay in the game. And of course, the way they started was simply remarkable. It was the best way you could start a game 3 away to go up by 11 points, two quarter time. But the flat out shooting from Chris Goulding and Clark in that second and third term in particular, they just couldn't match it, unfortunately. So, lots of lessons learned, but yeah, big defensive assignments or maybe player personnel acquisitions that they've got to work through. And as we look into our crystal ball, normally we're looking at the next game ahead, but this time we're looking at personnel. And we've done it in different phases and patches across our Wildcat Wrap episodes, looking at, the young talent time and who's tied to us and who might be going elsewhere and who we need to re-sign. Well, now we're going to look at the big and key playmakers. So Josh, you're going to kick us off with, of course, the man that's on everybody's lips, not just from a Perth Wildcats perspective, but the whole NBL. I'd say the whole of Australia is very eager and wanting to know what Bryce Cotton's BC 11, what his next move is going to be. And then you're going to talk a little bit about KD, the real KD, Christian Doolittle. So Josh, give us your thoughts on where you think they both sit or where your gut is for it.
Yeah, well, quickly before we jump into this, mate, with obviously all the free agency talk and I guess all the news now, there's no better spot than, I know a little shameless plug here, but the Basketball Fix's free agency tracker, a little website up there. Check out www.thebasketballfix.com for the latest news and rumors and everything like that on there. And you can go down there, and if you're another team supporter or anything like that, you can filter it to your own teams, see who's contracted going into NBL 26, see who's coming off of contract going into NBL 26, and see who some of the biggest rumors are coming in to NBL 26 as well. So make sure you go check that out. Now, Bryce Cotton, like you mentioned, mate, he's pretty much the man on everyone's mind. And I know there's been a lot of rumors, and he's been linked to pretty much nearly every other club in the NBL. And there was some strong rumors essentially to Melbourne United, potentially the Sydney Kings and the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers. Now, Melbourne United and Sydney will throw into the same category. I think both of them teams were essentially rumored due to the fact that they can afford him in his contract. We all know it every single season. The big three, the Perth Wildcats, Melbourne United, and the Sydney Kings, they can go deep when it comes to salary cap and soft cap situations as well. Now, the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers, I think personally, was more of a rumor and a slight linking due to the relationship between him and Scott Roth. Apparently, there's a very tight relationship there that stems back to all the years ago with Trevor Gleeson before, obviously, Trev went over to the NBA, and obviously Scott went over to Tasmania as well. So there's a deep connection there. But I'm happy to say, I guess, from a Perth Wildcats perspective, that when Bryce had an interview and sat down with Lockie Reed, I think it was yesterday or the day before, he basically 90%, I will say, ruled out the chances of him going to another another NBL team. And it was an interesting one. I know the conversation was stemmed around, basically I don't see myself playing for another NBL team or something of that ilk there as well. So that's obviously good for Perth Wildcats fans. He's obviously signed over in Puerto Rico. He's going to play with some incredible players over there as well. But I don't know. Like, I've got a couple of things here. When I think about this signing and potentially him coming back, there's two things. Now, there's the legacy standpoint, and then there's the cash standpoint. So I'm not sure the money elsewhere is going to be as much different as what potentially it could be for the Perth Wildcats. Let's just say it's $200,000, $300,000 a year. 100%, if I'm sat there going, I can earn $200,000 or $300,000 elsewhere, I will be genuinely thinking about that for sure. I love my money. He's at that stage now. He's at the twilight of his career and everything like that. It's a genuine conversation. But from a legacy standpoint, he probably has the closest chance of potentially tipping off Andrew Gaze when it comes down to being the greatest player of all time in the NBL. I think it's 7 MVPs for Gazy, 5 now for Bryce Cotton. He's definitely climbing into that ilk now of being the greatest player of all time in basically half the time that Andrew Gaze has been in the league. So that's where it comes down to it, I think, for this thing. I'm going to say one thing right now. I think he does re-sign for the Perth Wildcats. I've tried having him, and I've tried getting in contact with the Perth Wildcats. They are wrapping him up in cotton wool, and I've even spoken to his presentation. They are doing everything right now. I genuinely think he's going to return as a Perth Wildcat come NBL 26. I know a decision is relatively imminent next couple of weeks and everything like that, but I'm going to lock in that the Perth Wildcats will re-sign Bryce Cotton for NBL 26. That's a big one there. Obviously, there's a lot to work out, lots to play out for that situation, but we'll leave that one there. Now, Christian Doolittle is the other one, obviously, that I'll speak about before I throw over to the main man, Declan, but Christian Doolittle is a very simple one. He wants to return to Perth, and he will on a multi-year deal. I think he'll be here until at least NBL 27, maybe a 2-year deal plus a player option on top of that, so maybe a 3-year deal and some sort of structure around that as well. Now, God forbid Bryce does not return for NBL 26. Christian Doolittle is the perfect piece to build your team around. We saw what he did in Game 3 against Melbourne United. I think it was a 30-point double-double or pretty much around that sort of category as well. His back end of the season after he came back from his injury was just next to incredible. Probably averaged around the 24 points per game, sort of 8 to 9 rebounds and about 4 or 5 assists. So incredible numbers from a guy who was probably a defensive player only. So he'll return. That's as simple as it is, and he'll be a Perth Wildcat for a long time. But Dech, you got a couple of names to speak about as well, mate?
Yeah, so I've got Dylan Windler and Keanu Pinder, and I'll start with good old DW. Bit of a lifesaver in the end of the season, I think, boys, for us. Probably wouldn't have made it to Game 3 without him. So he's got that defensive presence. He is an NBA caliber shooter, that's for sure. And signing that 1-year contract with us, I think we definitely pick up the phone. Like, it's an opportunity to see if he wants to come back, if his family likes it here, if he's happy enough. So I definitely think we pick up the phone. And I think he's also one of those players that needs sort of a season under his belt, a bit like Christian Doolittle last season, where he did not show anywhere near the signs he's showing this year, and he's absolutely just skyrocketed. So I think DW coming back for another season, he's already got the format down pat, the chemistry, he knows the coaches, the game style. I think that'll definitely benefit him, and then we might see a bit more of that aggressive behaviour come out, especially on the defensive end, because I wouldn't say he's the tallest player or the strongest, but he's always there getting the rebounds, hassling the other players. So I definitely think if we can, we bring him back. But I wouldn't be surprised if I see him sign in the G League or the NBA of some sort. So keep your eyes on that one. I think his name will definitely be spoken, and we'll just have to wait to see if he does come back. And Keanu Pinder, this is a big one. Like, this is a massive talking point, because he is a Perth-born superstar. He's shown it at Cairns. He was an absolute MVP caliber player. And this season, he hasn't really shown the signs, especially for a marquee sort of paid guy. Everyone expected the walking double-double essentially from him. And in the 2 seasons we've had him, in my opinion, he hasn't gone near what he was at Cairns. He was an absolute superstar there. And now he's kind of like a shell of what he was. And yes, he's had some good games, but his worst is bench worthy, and that's putting it nicely. And his best, as I said, is MVP caliber. So do I think he stays? No, honestly, I don't think so, just because of the money. He's not going to get paid as much by us if we want to re-sign him compared to what he was put on. And he might take a pay cut just because it's, hometown, his family's here, he's from here. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see him somewhere else in the NBL if we don't pick up his option, kind of, for example, Brisbane, Cairns. So I wouldn't be holding my breath, to say the least, if he comes back. But over to you, Josh.
You go, Batty. Yeah, I got something to say after, but Batty, you go have a bit of a say in these, mate. What do you reckon of those 4 names? You want to re-sign all 4? You want to get 3 of them back? You want to bring 2 of them back? Once you're done, throw it back over here because I got some thoughts on what Declan said.
Well, if they had like $10 million in the salary cap, they may be able to get all of them. But unfortunately, that's not the case. I think BC, as you summed it up quite well, the Perth Wildcats family, and then, of course, Mark Arena, Danny Mills, they will have done everything they can to convince him. It's now just up to Bryce. So the decision is in Bryce's hands. From a KD perspective, I'm no doubt they're doing everything they can to get him for that contract. But when he came out with Craig O'Donoghue on the Dribble podcast about a month ago, and he said he wants to sign long-term. If you're a fan, if you're in the Perth Wildcats administration and you're hearing that is absolutely like great news. So I think it's a matter of when, not so much if. Dylan, I think that it's interesting because I feel like they need a true big. Dylan was great in patches and spurts. Obviously elite shooting from 3-point rebounding ability, terrific for his height and his size. They sort of touched on Dech. But I think they need a true 5, whether it's a marquee Australian guy or whether it's an import. And then, of course, Keanu, everything that I'm hearing is that he's going somewhere else. I think he seems to work better in a smaller, I guess, niche kind of unit team. So as you sort of outlined as well, Dech, Brisbane, Cairns. So Cairns might be, a nice welcome home for him. Of course, Adam Ford won't be there. It'll be someone else. So yeah, big time watch his space as always. So Josh, let us have it. Your big thoughts on KP and DW.
I don't necessarily. So I'm going to disagree with something that you said there, Batty. I don't necessarily believe that we need to go out there and get a big man. And it's for this reason. I look at Melbourne United. I look at the Illawarra Hawks, who are currently in the championship series right now. Have they really got that bona fide big man who is back to the basket, can give you 15 and 20 or 15 and 12 or something of that ilk? They don't. Marcus Lee had a big game in game 1 of the NBL finals, but hasn't really shown that same sort of capability all season long. So I kind of disagree with that. I think if you do run it back with a Keanu Paidra or someone of that ilk, you possibly can obviously go relatively far in the playoffs. And maybe you can obviously continue to keep a guy like Dylan Windler. Now, also to slightly disagree with Declan's perspective on the Dylan Windler situation, I don't think he'll go back to the NBA G League. And it's purely for one reason and one reason only. If it's the G League that he's going to go and settle for, I think he's going to make more money and have a lot more of a better chance to make it back into the NBA by playing overseas. And that's why he came over to the Perth Wildcats, why he came over to the NBL for the first and foremost, because he sees this now as a league to catapult your season, your career back into the NBA. And he came out and said that he wants a 10-day contract, not a 2-way contract, a 10-day contract. So that there gives me everything that I need to hear from a Dylan Windler perspective. It's either the NBA on a 10-day contract or something like that, or back to the NBL or another international league where he is trying to apply his craft to potentially re-sign back into the NBA at some stage. So that's where I see him. Would I love to see Dylan back in the team? 100% I would. I think it really does come down to Keanu Paidra, a bit of a stepping stone in a way for the Perth Wildcats. If he re-signs, I think you can bring back a guy like Dylan, but you've got to get a little bit more out of Keanu Paidra. But for me, it seems to be Keanu's either going to re-sign in Perth or he's going to go over to Asia and try to make a bit of quick cash whilst he can at this particular point in his career and age as well. So it's going to be an interesting one because there's quite a few rumors. Like I'm going to break down a few of the biggest ones shortly, but there are quite a few big names, obviously rumored and speculation and everything like that may come over to the Perth Wildcats, which will make it interesting. And you speak of money there, Batty. Well, they may not have $10 million in salary cap, but they can definitely go a little bit over the salary cap. That's why we pay a bit of an increase in ticket prices over here because the product on the court is 9 times out of 10 a pretty good product, which makes our life a lot easier and a lot more funner as well as Perth Wildcats fans.
Well, you sort of touched on it right there, Josh. So the rumor mill has been going crazy. The silly season is almost officially upon us. Of course, we have the grand final series to play out, but with 8 teams out of the running, where everyone just goes, well, he's going to go here. I want him here. Who's the most, I guess, attractive looking free agent, or maybe players that aren't here but could possibly come to the NBL. So you sort of course, ear to the ground, Josh. Everyone in the NBL, all the big wigs, in your high profile role that you've accomplished and worked your way into. So why don't you give us and the fans, the great Perth Wildcat fans, some ideas as of today? Who could possibly be making their way to Perth? And Dech and I will give a big thumbs up or a cross. We don't want them here in Perth.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question first and foremost, and I want both of you to answer it. Now, if you've got the same answer, that's fine, but I'll start with you, Dech. What is a rumor? If I was to say such and such is rumored to be signing at a particular place, what is a rumor in that sort of context?
Well, I think it comes with a big name as well. When, people talk a bit of Chinese whispers, especially the NBL, it's known for it. So as soon as you have someone with a bit of a background with the NBL, say, someone that's worked with a team or a commentator, as soon as a name's thrown out there, everyone starts chatting away, and then they add teams into it and their thoughts, and then it becomes a massive rumor. So, for example, if you have someone like a Leonard Copeland say, Alan Williams to Southeast Melbourne sort of thing, then people start talking about it, and it just gets bigger and bigger. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, but and the thing is, though, that I want to make clear, sorry, Batty, before you jump in here, the thing I want to make clear is a rumor is a rumor. It's not an official signature. Like that's what the epitome of a rumor is, because I've been posting a lot of things on social media, and the NBL community, I think the Australian community, when it comes to sports media, needs to grow the fuck up a little bit, because when I put a rumor out there, it's for one reason and one reason only. It's a rumor. I'm not telling you right now that Bryce Cotton is signing for Melbourne United. I'm not telling you right now that Milton Doyle is signing for Melbourne United. And I'm not telling you right now that somebody else huge is signing for Melbourne United. And in the comments section, people are writing to me, how does Melbourne United afford these players? Well, clearly they're not going to go after every single one of them. It is people that are linked to these particular teams in free agency. And there are a lot of teams and a lot of players out there in the world who can be linked to teams, and multiple players to teams as well. It's just stupidity at its absolute finest. So I just need to throw that out there, boys, because I need to clear the airways. I've been copping a lot of shit, and as everyone does at these sort of times, unless your name's Olgun Yulich, no one believes any sort of rumor, because they believe such and such is now going to sign, even though the word rumor means that. So anyways, let's move on. I just thought I'd clear that up with everyone, and especially the Perth Wildcats faithful, who aren't dumb as Melbourne United supporters and elsewhere as well. But let's get into the first one here, lads. Now, Alan Williams is a name that you just brought up there, Declan, and obviously there's a lot of rumours around him. Now, he has said on X, formerly Twitter, that he is keen and open to an NBL return. Now, the former Southeast Melbourne Phoenix big man, who was an absolute superstar in his couple of seasons over here in the NBL, didn't re-sign for that third season in the NBL for Southeast Melbourne due to some knee troubles. Now, if we go all the way back to his first season in the NBL, he actually nearly signed for the Perth Wildcats. They elected to go, I believe it was John Mooney, don't quote me, but I believe it was John Mooney over Alan Williams at that particular season. So it's going to be a little bit interesting when it comes down to it. But Alan Williams is a guy who's been rumoured to a few teams. There's the Illawarra Hawks, there's Southeast Melbourne, there's Melbourne United, there's the Sydney Kings, and obviously the Perth Wildcats. Now, if I was to say to you lads here, and I'll start with Batty to get your first thoughts, Alan Williams to the Perth Wildcats, yes or no?
I mean, I feel like I'm contradicting myself here, because he is the ultimate big guy, the 15 and 12, as you say. But he's also prone for foul trouble too, quite a bit. So whilst he's had couple of seasons in the NBL, he may have, gotten the umpiring sort of figured it out, how to sort of play to the umpires and what they're calling. He can also get fouled out quite early in games too. So that's a lot of money sitting on your bench unnecessarily. We've seen that the style of roster that Perth have assembled, which doesn't have a big guy. Typically that typical big person can get you all the way to game 3 of the semifinals and lose by a point. So it's clearly a successful formula. So whether they choose to go down that path or not, the short answer, I guess, is probably Alan Williams for that kind of big. I'd probably say no. Dech, what about you? Your thoughts on big AW? Because we sort of been rolling with acronyms for players all podcasts, so we might as well keep it rolling.
Well, I just want to add in the fact there, it was actually to Sean Thomas that we took over Alan Williams, Josh. So that one, I thought I won't butt him in there, but I'll add it in after. So you can call me a stat nerd at the end of it if you want. My thoughts on Alan Williams. My thought on Alan Williams, great player. I think he's a great team guy. From what I saw at Southeast Melbourne, I think they really liked him. And he plays hard. And for us, I'm going to say yes, just because of the troubles that we've had signing a big guy. We've had Keanu Pinder. We've had Sean Thomas, who really didn't do anything, crazy. Before that, we had John Mooney, which, he was an absolute double-double. So I think if we have someone like that on the floor at the same time as, say, a Bryce Cotton and a Christian Doolittle, that's kind of a perfect fit in my eyes. If he's not injury prone and he's playing that, 25 to 30 minutes a game, and you get your 15 and 12 out of him, that is the perfect sort of recipe to what we need. And it's kind of like, if you can fit him into the starting lineup and get that chemistry around him, I think why not? Like, give it a shot, see how he is. He might come back with a chip on his shoulder and be like, excited to come back and absolutely kick ass. So it's a yes from me.
Yeah, I like it, boys. Some good points there. And I think it's a yes for me as well. And there's another reason as to why I say yes for Alan Williams is the fact that he's such a great ambassador for the NBL. It's clear he absolutely loves the NBL. He loves talking positively about the NBL. I do genuinely believe that when he says he's open to an NBL return, I think he'll find himself on a roster this NBL season. And I know there's that NBL ambassador potential money there as well. He's a guy who you could definitely throw some cash at in terms of possibly making an NBL ambassador coming into NBL 26. Now, let's go straight to another big man. And he's a big name. He's a big man. He's a big personality. And he brings the flair and the big playing style as well. I'm speaking of Montrezl Harrell. Now, he is expected to re-sign with the Adelaide 36ers, and that is a big part of this story. But once again, has been linked to the likes of Perth, Sydney, and Melbourne with the big money clubs. Now, I'm not sure if this is a sign that the Perth Wildcats will do necessarily, but I think the conversation will be had because he brings eyes, he brings attention, and he can genuinely win a team a game. Whilst he can also lose a game for a team, he can definitely win a game as well. Now, I think he's an exciting player. I think if, let's just say, they do re-sign Bryce Cotton, it is the perfect player for Bryce. You've got the pick and roll, you've got the pick and pop, you've got the ISO play as well, in which we sometimes lose out of a guy like Keanu Pinder. I guess what I'm more trying to say is right now, if KD, BC, and Montrezl Harrell are your 3 imports, are you happy with that or not too happy at all? I'll start with you, Dech.
Nah, not at all, mate. I actually think he's a bit of a cockhead, to be honest with you. The way he plays basketball, he's, tough and, hard to guard, and he's got all the talk and the chip. But it's not the sort of personality that would fit in with the guys we have on our team. Like you say, look at Christian Doolittle and BC. They're not very loud players. They're, not all about showing off. They're quite, humble team players. They want the team to succeed, and they don't go out of their way to yell at people and just make a shit show like he does. As a fan, it's cool watching him on other teams and, having a big personality like that in a league like the NBL. But I think if he comes to Perth, it's only just going to bring more trouble, more animosity. The locker room's going to end up like Adelaide's, which is an absolute shit show, and we don't want that. It's a no for me, to be blunt.
Let me just jump in quickly, Batty, before you give your answer here. Now, I genuinely think it will work quickly, mate. And I don't think he'd ruin the Perth Wildcats locker room as much as he's ruined Adelaide's, because he hasn't ruined Adelaide's. Adelaide's has been ruined for the last 6 or 7 years. So let's just clear that up right now. What Montrezl Harrell has done hasn't ruined their franchise, that's the likes of people well and truly above. You know, they are ripping up one of their NBL legends' names off the court coming into NBL 26 because of bad blood there. That's how shit that franchise is going right now. Now, they will sign Mike Wells once again for NBL 26, purely based for no other reason than the fact that it's literal sort of press. It's sort of a bit of goodwill. It's a bit of good positive outlook on the Adelaide 36ers. Oh, wow, they haven't sacked a coach going into another season this year like they have for the past 5 or 6 years. So that is the Adelaide 36ers point. Now, Batty, I'll throw to you quickly, mate, but what are your thoughts? I know Dech sort of said he's a cockhead. He's not like that. I think he's the modern player. I think he's the guy in which you need for an NBL team. You need him to grow the game. The NBL's in their growth stage. They need eyes in the league. Montrezl Harrell is definitely that. And putting in one of the biggest markets in the NBL, I think it's positive for the league and maybe the Perth Wildcats. What are your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, I mean, like, he's certainly going to get plenty of likes and follows and people tuning in just to see what he does. I don't think he sort of endeared himself too well to the Perth Wildcats fans on a couple of different occasions, and that's just him. That's who he is. That's his personality, and you either love it or loathe it. You certainly make some, strong points in regards to, he's a guy with an incredible skill set, that's, a really accomplished player in the NBA. So we know what he can do on the court. And I think Perth's, front office staff, I think they're probably strong enough to make sure that a player like Montrez would not so much fall in line, but, he would have potentially Bryce around him, who, no doubts he respects amazingly. But, if Bryce isn't there, does that sort of happen? So there's so many ifs, buts, and maybes to this potential, rumor, if we want to call it that. I'd probably be a no if I had to. I think there are probably other higher character individuals, but from an NBL perspective, I hope he does stay in the NBL because he generates a heck of a lot of interest. And after the last 4 minutes, well, that was case in point.
Boys, I'm disappointed in you two lads there. I'm really disappointed in you two guys. I think you guys are choosing coercion over championships. So we'll leave that there and we'll park that for another conversation and another day. Now, another big name here is Kendrick Davis, the other KD in the league. This guy's an absolute superstar. Point guard from the LA 36ers, MVP form last year. He's a guy who can 100% turn a game on its head. Now, do I see him signing with the Perth Wildcats with a Bryce Cotton? I think there's a slight genuine chance. I'm not sure the money and everything like that would 100% work, but there's a genuine chance I think that could happen. Those two guys have a healthy respect for one another, and they love, obviously, having a chat after games and everything like that. Now, I guess there's a couple of things to look at when we do have a bit of a look at this. So first and foremost, I don't think he re-signs with the Adelaide 36ers this year. So maybe there's not even a chance that he returns to the NBL in general. But he's watched on his social media. He's been very cryptical. Thank you, Adelaide. I've loved my time here. He posted a thing a couple of days ago, basically thanking the city of Adelaide for all their support with a massive collage of photos and everything like that. I don't think he returns to Adelaide whatsoever. Mike Wells returns 100%. Wipe the floor with it, write a pen through it, everything like that. All you got to do, rule him out of returning to LA 36ers. Once again, though, the big teams in the NBL are rumored to potentially be interested in him. We see this all the time. I wouldn't necessarily say the Adelaide 36ers are a small market team, but they aren't as big as a Perth, Melbourne, and Sydney. And we see it all the time. Melbourne, Sydney, and Perth go after these guys who have played for the Cairns Taipans, the Brisbane Bullets, the Illawarra Hawks, and all that sort of stuff in the history of the league. And they bring them to a big market team to try and have some success with these superstar players. Kendrick Davis is 100% that. He's an exciting basketball player. Batty, what are your thoughts, mate? Would you love to see Kendrick Davis on a Perth Wildcats roster next year? Or have you got your reservations like you do of Montrezl Harrell as well?
Kendrick seems like a pretty high character person. If Bryce isn't there, I think KD would be the perfect replacement from a points perspective, obviously, and then even assists too. He's had games where he's had high assist stages as well. So I think that he could fill that gap, but only on the proviso if Bryce goes elsewhere. I don't know whether Kendrick and Bryce can work. I just don't think that's a dynamic that would sort of fit our kind of style. But if there's an availability in that guard spot with BC not there, I think KD would be a really, really terrific replacement. You certainly heard about the, I guess, potential bad blood between Mike Wells and Kendrick Davis. That's sort of been across, at least the second half of the season for sure. So, would not be surprised. It'd be a shame for Adelaide, but wouldn't be surprised if he maybe goes elsewhere. Asia seems to be the big interest market at the moment, just throwing insane numbers at many players in the NBL and of course Europe too, to get them to beef up their competition. Interesting to see how that all plays out from a KD perspective. And it looks like he's going down the cryptic path similar to what Will McDowell-White did a couple of seasons ago. So many people were waiting to see where he ended up with. Dech, do you think that KD could be a nice fit for Perth?
Absolutely. I'm going to go the opposite way and say that if we had Davis and Cotton, it would be the most dynamic backcourt in NBL history. Now, just look at this, for example. You have Bryce Cotton playing the shooting guard and you have KD, Kendrick Davis running the point. That is a scary sort of look to any team. Like, if I'm a Sydney or a Melbourne and I see that, I'm shitting my pants, man. Like, that is high caliber. That is a lot of points and a lot of playmaking that can happen there. So the money wise and, paychecks and salary caps, that's probably the only thing I think that will stop it, considering if Bryce comes back, how much he's going to sign for. And then you add in all the other players plus what Kendrick Davis would want as well, because he is basically an apprentice of what Bryce Cotton is at this point. So I would love to see him at the Perth Wildcats. Do I see him at the Perth Wildcats if Bryce Cotton stays? No. But if Bryce Cotton leaves, absolutely, I think you bring Kendrick Davis in for BC. I think that is as close as you're going to get, essentially, with the players that have played in the NBL and overseas at the moment. So it's a massive yes from me.
Yeah, it's a massive yes from me. Do I think it's going to happen? No, I don't think it will happen. And I don't think it will happen even if Bryce leaves or if Bryce stays. And there's one reason as to why I have a slight reservation about this rumor. And obviously it's an interesting one to talk about because he was second in the MVP and it'd be great to, if Bryce does leave, to replace an MVP with an MVP essentially. But when I look at Kendrick Davis and the relationship that he has with Bryce Cotton, that is building or has been building for some time, the reason I don't see him signing for the Perth Wildcats is because I believe he will want to forge his career and in his own way as well. Going to the Perth Wildcats, there's only going to be one comparison for his whole entire career, and it's going to be to Bryce Cotton. Is he living up to Bryce Cotton's hype? Is he living and playing up to Bryce Cotton's level? I think he could definitely handle that, but I don't think he'd necessarily want to cop that for the entirety of his NBL career as well. So I don't see him signing for the Perth Wildcats. Would it be awesome? 100%. Would it be cool? 100%. Would I love to see it? 100%. But I don't think we'll see him in the red and black in NBL 26, which is unfortunate. But obviously that's why these are rumors and there are some slight little links here and there. Now let's go to local guys. And this is where it's important because we can sit here talking about import players and everything like that. But to build a good team, you've got to have a solid crux of local talent. And the Perth Wildcats this year probably had a decent amount. Ty Webster's a local guy. Jesse Wagstaff's another guy. Elijah Pepper had moments. Benny Henschel had moments. You got David Aquera as well. You got Michael Harris. A lot of guys who can show promise, but just for whatever reason haven't stepped up in the big moments. And I think this guy right here could be the guy in which solves a lot of the problems. Sunday Dech. Now, he's a former Perth Wildcat from all those years ago who moved on, and he's obviously been LA 36ers now for a number of seasons. And all reports are he is a high-character guy. He is a leader in that locker room at LA 36ers, and it's probably not hard to be, but he is a genuine leader. I've seen him in person. I've had conversations. I've interviewed at press conferences. He is a genuine guy who has that leadership oozing off of him. But what's his game style? It's a defensive-minded guard in which can stop some of the best talent in the NBL. Now, we've seen him slow down Bryce Cotton. We've seen him slow down Chris Goulding. We've seen him slow down some of the best players that we've seen over the last couple of seasons for the Adelaide 36ers. Now, would I love to see him for the Perth Wildcats? I would love to see him back over here. He's a guy who, let's just say Bryce leaves and you bring in a guy like Kendrick Davis, for example. We'll use that example like that. He's the perfect fit for a guy next to him. He doesn't need to have 10, 15, 20 shots. He can happily have 5 or 6 shots. He can happily have none, and he will happily play defense really hard for the team. Declan, mate, Sunday Dech. Yes or no?
He is an awesome player. I actually am quite a fan of Sunday Dech. His defense is just, awesome. He doesn't get too flustered. He's not Shea Illy, but he is close to it. The way he guards, he doesn't need 1,000 shots, as you said. And he's a former Wildcat, so he kind of knows how the system works. He's played with Wagstaff. He's played with Cotton. They're the two that come off the top of my head. But I think he'd actually love to be back in Perth. I don't think he's enjoyed his time at Adelaide like he thought. It's been very up and down, as we've said, up and over there. So I think for Sunday Dech to come back to the Wildcats, would it be a perfect fit for a defensive guard? Absolutely. Do we need a defensive guard? Absolutely. So I think if we can pick up the phone and he's happy to come back, absolutely sign him on a multi-year deal. Where even if he's just, off the bench like he has been for Adelaide, he's the perfect sort of team player that we need on that bench. So massive yes from me. Great guy, great team player, and he's just great at defense.
Go on, buddy. Hit us off, mate. Sunday Dech, he's got a bit of a Perth connection here as well, mate. He's got some family over here. The Perth Rhinos is a Sudanese basketball competition over here in which I believe it's his brother Solomon Dech, who's his player agent as well, has a massive part of that. Sunday Dech, mate, do you believe it'd be a great fit? And what are your thoughts on him returning to the Perth Wildcats for NBL 26?
Well, here's the big question. So many podcasts across the Wildcat Wrap, it's always been, do the Perth Wildcats have a defensive stopper? And with Ty Webster missing, 3/4 of the season, and even Ty sometimes is not really great at it, the answer has been a flat out no. So don't know why we're spending so much time talking about Sunday Dech. This is a flat out yes. It is an easy yes. He is exactly what they need. Give him, a fair contract. Give him 2 years. It's a no-brainer. So I'm not going to retract over the really great comments you guys have discussed in regards to his mainly pros. I can't really highlight too many cons. So let's move on to the next individual rumor. But if they can get it done, that would be a massive win for Perth.
So Batty's just telling us there, Dech, that he'd love to see Sunday Dech on a 10-year contract. So that's great to hear from Batty. He's finally gotten off the fence this little segment here, and he's given us a bit of a positive spin coming into the rumor mill segment. Now the last one, his jersey is sitting over here in the back here, Mr. Isaac White. Now this is sort of one that I'm starting slightly, to be honest with you. And there's a couple of reasons. I spoke to Isaac years ago and I asked him about the thoughts of potentially playing for the Perth Wildcats. And he was sort of like, it'd be great. This would be cool. It's a great team. It's a great franchise. Now, Isaac has typically played his basketball on the East Coast. He's played up in Queensland. He's played in Sydney. He's played in the NBL for the Brisbane Bullets most recently. He's played for the Illawarra Hawks a couple of seasons ago. He's now bringing his talents to the West Coast in the NBL 1 West competition for a team who I'll be commentating a few games for this year, the Rockingham Flames. Now, the Rockingham Flames aren't a small little club over here in WA. They are a bit of a powerhouse and have been over the last couple of seasons. They've won their first NBL 1 championship. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago now. They have been building some incredible stuff over here for a number of years now. And he's bringing himself and his best mate, Emmett Nah, over to the Rockingham Flames for this NBL 1 West season. Something in the back of my mind is telling me you don't just come over to Perth to not try and impress the Perth Wildcats and try to get a roster spot. Now, do I believe he's going to be fighting for this roster spot with the likes of an Elijah Pepper, with the likes of a Michael Harris, with those sort of guys? 100%. And it's going to be tough because he won't really have had a chance to showcase his talents over here in WA before, obviously, free agency closes. I think there's a bit of a window, maybe 1 game or 2 games maximum, where they would have played for the Rockingham Flames, whether it's preseason or NBL season. I'm not too sure, but he wouldn't have had a whole season to sort of show what he can produce. Would you like to see, Batty, Isaac White, the scorer, defender, and playmaker, the backup guard, all that sort of stuff, would you like to see him on the Perth Wildcats roster coming into NBL 26 over the likes of Elijah Pepper, Michael Harris, and those guys as well?
Well, what I can hear, Josh, is that you are his number one supporter and cheerleader. You may even be his player agent. So I'm unsure of that. And I don't know if there's a conflict of interest here. The fact that he's coming up in this chat. Look, Isaac White, I felt has almost gone backwards in his time at Brisbane from when he burst into the scene in Tasmania, just ever so slightly. And maybe it's just the Brisbane kind of franchise that, it hasn't really hit the heights that the NBL would probably want it to as a big market. And that has nothing to do with Isaac. It's probably just the environment that he's been brought into. Is he or would he be an upgrade on someone like Michael Harris, which I know also you have a great connection with, having a chat with him, and a really, really wonderful person. Michael hasn't gotten the minutes that he would have liked. So would Isaac be an upgrade on that? Yeah, absolutely. So if they can get him for the right price, I wouldn't give him a 10-year deal like we would be giving Sunday for sure. But Isaac, I think would be a nice addition, a nice bench spot. And again, right under your nose at the Rockingham Flames from a commentary perspective, you're going to be able to make a great case for him to Danny Mills to pick him up during that free agency. You're going to be making sure when he's a bit sweaty, have the towel just to wipe him off, driving him to the games, from the games, making his lunch for him. So, yeah, look, I think from a serious perspective, though, I think he could be quite a nice addition. And you do bring up an interesting point in regards why you're coming all the way over to Western Australia to play NBL 1 if you don't want to have any interest in going for the Perth Wildcats. Dech, do you think that he could be a nice, I guess, addition to, your bench squad and your bench team?
Yeah, 100%. I haven't seen enough of Isaac White to make a massive judgment. I think he seems like a great team guy. Every time he's out there on the floor, he's always putting in the effort, and that's what I've seen. There's a few games there where he needed to play excess minutes for Brisbane because of their injuries, and he stepped up. He's not oversized as a guard. He doesn't have too many moves that, step out at you and you're like, oh, wow, like this guy can play. But I think he's a great team guy. He hasn't been given the chance I think he deserves, is probably the best way to put it. He's been around the league for quite a few years now. I think he played at Illawarra as well at one point, and he just didn't get the opportunity that he deserved. Always sitting on the bench, getting junk time. So I think if he was to come over to the Perth Wildcats and we can sign him on a decent deal, get him here for a few years, really bring him up as, say, someone that's like an Elijah Pepper, I think if we have got the capabilities to do that, go for it. And he could really show up and be one of those, tough guys that comes off the bench that, you need. So it's a yes from me. Do I think it happens? Probably not, just because of who we've already got on the roster. Elijah Pepper, Ty Webster,
What do you mean?
And a couple of...
We've only got one player contracted for next season, mate. We've only got Dante Russo-Nance. He's the only contracted player for next season. Everyone else is options. We have an open slather this year, mate. We don't. They're all player options. Like if I bring up the Perth Wildcats now, Dante's contracted. Aquera's a player option. I think Pepper's either a team option or a player option. Thomas Skirovic is also a team option. And then Itano Munster's the only guy that is contracted, but he's probably going to head to the NBA. He signed a 2-year next star deal, so he can come back for NBL 26. So we have a very clear spot. This is the thing. This is what I'm bringing these guys up for a couple of reasons. There is a spot for an Isaac White if we want it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that with John Riley and the connection he has with Webster and Pepper, because he has a previous connection with him, I think he brings them back. He's always spoken highly of those two guys specifically. You could always swap White in for Michael Harris. I think that's probably the best way to put it, and the most likely, that if he's going to take a roster spot, he'd probably take Michael Harris's. So, as I said, I would like to see him at the Wildcats, but do I think it happens? Probably not. But he does deserve an opportunity where he's going to be able to play some NBL. So I'd like to see him, whether that's, at Brisbane again or somewhere else. I'd really like to see him get a good opportunity.
Yeah, I'll just throw my little 2 cents out there for what it's worth. I don't think he'll come over to the Perth Wildcats for a Michael Harris type of role in which you're not really playing many minutes. So I think the thing we've got to remember right now as well, let's just say for whatever reason that the Perth Wildcats don't pick up Elijah Pepper's option, that's where they might target a guy like Isaac White even more. But we've also got to remember Benny Henschel is no longer going to be a Perth Wildcat if he's drafted this season. I think he'll earn some sort of two-way contract anyways. I don't think we'll see him again in the NBL. So I think he'll head over to the NBA. Once again, that opens up that sort of role. We see it all the time with John. I spoke to him midway through the season. He loves making those younger guys wait and earn their opportunity. So when they do get it, they know how much hard work they had to put in. So maybe that's where Elijah Pepper this season has a big year for the Warwick Senators, comes back into the NBL next year, takes that sort of Benny Henschel role, and then you've got Isaac White coming into it. Now, I really think right now, if I'm putting my bottom dollar on it, if it came down to Isaac White, Elijah Pepper, Michael Harris, and maybe you could even throw in, I don't know, maybe you throw a Hiram Harris in. I'm picking Isaac White over all three of those guys, I should say, because Isaac is coming into his peak right now. We've seen when he gets his opportunity, he can score that sort of 10 to 15 points per game, have the 4 or 5 assists and everything like that. He's the guy that you need on your team. I think he's very defensive conscious as well, whereas some of these other guys probably aren't. And I think he fits into a John Riley system. It's a lot of offense. It's a fast pace of play, and it works. So, yeah, just a couple of names there. I love all your points, 100%. I'm not fighting and disagreeing with any of it. I'm just sort of saying right now that I think there's a genuine possibility in which we see Isaac White on a team. Like I said, I don't think you come over to WA for no other reason than potentially trying to work your way into an NBL roster. So I want to quickly, before we end this episode, Batty, just quickly speak on, just name everyone that's out of contract this year. So as you heard, I said Dante is the only guy contracted, and there's a couple of other player options. But coming off the books this year, Christian Doolittle, Bryce Cotton, Hiram Harris, Michael Harris, Benny Henschel, Keanu Pinder, Jesse Wagstaff, Ty Webster, Dylan Windler, and Todd Withers. This year is exciting for the Perth Wildcats, lads. It's bloody exciting because let's just say Bryce Cotton doesn't re-sign, and I think that's why these deals are ending when Bryce leaves. This is the possibility where you can restructure, retinker, and redo your whole entire roster in one off season. To Danny Mills, you're an absolute fucking genius. I will tell you right now, you are an absolute genius, mate, because no one else in the league will be doing what you're doing in terms of everything like this. He finds talent where talent doesn't even ooze from. So massive shout, Danny Mills. Obviously a great episode, lads. And before we sign off, mate, I know Batty does a sign off anyways. Bat banter, mate. Kicking off for NBL fans who may be some big AFL fans, give that a bit of a shout out, mate, and sort of talk about what you've been doing over there, because you've been doing some good work.
Thanks very much, Josh. Really appreciate it. So yeah, Bat Banter. So we're doing our AFL review and preview on a weekly basis, starting next week with opening round, a very light opening round that begun this week with only 2 games. But if you just can't wait to get your teeth cut into it before that, I've also got 3 AFL pre-season podcast prediction pods for all the teams in the comp, and also a bit of a big AFL podcast too that I'm going to be recording after this. So yeah, hit us up, Bat Banter, on socials, Instagram, Facebook, of course, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But what a terrific, robust discussion that we had today, Josh. So as our Capitan, and Dech was also great having you on as well. Capitan, can you give us a nice, terrific sign-off as the Basketball Fix chief?
Am I getting the official sign-off and ending this show, mate, or do you want to have the official word?
Over to you, sir.
All right, mate. So, yes, obviously that wraps up another episode of the Wildcat Wrap. Now, for plenty more of the information like I've been speaking about on today's show, and to check everything else going on around the NBL world, go check out www.thebasketballfix.com for all your latest news, articles, and obviously the NBL free agency tracker. If you haven't checked it out, go and check it out. If you've heard any rumors, make sure you get in contact with us on our Instagram at the Basketball Fix Podcast. It's growing evidently. Obviously, there's memes, there's rumors, there's clips of all of our incredible shows on there, everything like that. Make sure you go and stay up to date with our community. It's growing by the day. Obviously, exciting times ahead for everyone involved at the Basketball Fix. And to you two fellas, mate, great episode. And we hope you've gotten your basketball fix.
Did enough to wrench it away. Cotton the dog for Henschel. You're kidding me.
Declan resolve has been tested. Cotton drops.
Not sure what to do, so kicks it back up to the top. Shot clock at 5 for Cotton. That's ridiculous.